Hello. Okay, for those of you returning to the channel, welcome back. And for those of you that are new here, that have just stumbled upon this video, then thank you for joining me. Here is my spoiler-free review of In the Lost Lands, a dark fantasy directed by Paul W.S. Anderson and based on a short story by George R.R. Martin, a story that I've not read. So I really didn't know what to expect here, and I'm not going to be able to compare it to that story, to that original source. But you've got Paul W.S. Anderson directing, and when it comes to Anderson as a director, there has only really been one movie that I really like. I'm quite a big fan of, in fact, and that is Event Horizon. I absolutely love that movie. I also just sort of love the kind of the mystery and the intrigue behind what the film also could have been in regards to sort of the kind of the more graphic and sort of the darker nature of its story. You know, all of the behind the scenes stuff that went on with that film. It's just a very fascinating movie, and it's a movie that I really like, that I'm a big fan of. And for me personally, Paul W.S. Anderson hasn't really made a movie like that since, though I've not seen every Paul Anderson movie. So here we've got In the Lost Lands. It stars Milla Jovovich as the sorceress Gray Alys and Dave Bautista as the drifter Boyce. The story follows a queen who, desperate for the magical ability to transform into a werewolf, sends Gray Alys and Boyce into the Lost Lands to retrieve this power. So let's start with what I liked about this film, because believe it or not, there are things that I really liked about In the Lost Lands. And one of those being, I really dug this movie from a visual perspective, and I just find myself quite shocked that I'm saying this about a Paul W.S. Anderson movie, but it's just how I felt. I really appreciated what he was attempting here at sort of kind of bringing this world to life by melding two different kind of worlds. So you've got this kind of very kind of Western medieval type of world, sort of melded with a near-futuristic hellscape, and it has this kind of very gothic, religious, dark atmosphere and vibe about it, which I just found myself being very compelled by. Like, from a visual perspective, to the set design, to how certain scenes are composed. Like, I just found myself really appreciating what Paul W.S. Anderson was attempting to do here by bringing this world to life. You know, it has that kind of very dark, fairy tale medieval vibe about it, but it's merged or melded with that kind of very modern, near futuristic hellscape. And I just kind of like how it all came together. I like how it was brought to life. Yes, you know, there's a lot of CGI, there's a lot of green screen, and a lot of the time the green screen doesn't work. But just through how it's brought to life visually, I can't help but not appreciate it. I actually quite dug it. One of my favourite scenes, in fact, from a visual perspective, is when we're first introduced to Boyce, played by Dave Bautista. And yes, there's a lot of green screen, but there's just something about how the camera is used within this scene, and just sort of all of kind of the sort of the details within this moment, with how this scene is composed, with sort of the lighting and just sort of the look, just so the overall look of this moment. I really liked it. I kind of really liked what he was trying to do. I mean, Dave Bautista does add a weight to this movie as well, which is non-existent, by the way. This is a very, you know, touching on the negatives a little bit, but you're jumping ahead. You know, there is no weight in this movie. It's quite a soulless experience. But, you know, Dave Bautista is trying his best here with the material he's got. You could kind of sense that sort of the Western vibe that Paul W.S. Anderson was actually aiming for with this movie. He said it himself, where, you know, at heart, this is a Western, and you sense that from a visual perspective, and as a result, I just found myself really appreciating this film from a visual perspective. And I never thought I'd find myself saying that about a Paul W.S. Anderson movie. And you know what? I'm probably going to be in a minority as well, yeah. And it is, you know, exactly what I felt like Anderson was attempting to do here with the story, which is, you know, for it to be a Western at heart. And I really did sense that from the imagery to the storytelling. It's all there. And I just really like this approach, along with the sort of melding of fairy tale mythical creatures and that kind of very steampunk gothic approach to the overall design and aesthetic of this movie. I just really appreciated it from that perspective. And I also really liked the score by Paul Haslinger. I think the music does a great job of kind of conveying sort of the world that's being brought to life, and I just really dug it. It's music that kind of really captures that dark gothic fairy tale mythical creature vibe that I'm getting, you know, within this movie from a visual perspective, and that is brought to life, I felt, beautifully through the music. When I was doing my notes for this movie, it's quite funny, in fact, because Paul Haslinger did the score to a few of the Underworld movies, and it's quite funny because from a design perspective, from a sort of a visual perspective, this movie did kind of remind me a little bit of the Underworld movies. They are also movies that I really dug. I really like those films. Yeah, they're not works of art or they're not masterpieces, but they are movies that I enjoyed and had a hell of a lot of fun with. And before I jump into the negatives, I just want to get this out of the way with. I found myself really enjoying this movie. I had a lot of fun with this film. I'm surprised that I'm even saying that, but I really didn't go into this movie expecting to like it. I thought I was going to completely just tear this film apart, because the trailer, from just watching the trailer, which I only ever saw once, by the way, I've only ever seen it advertised once in the cinema, it looked absolutely terrible. And it really did surprise me that I was as entertained as I was, that I was enjoying myself as I was. Yes, this is not a good film, but for me, it did take me back to movies like Underworld or Van Helsing even. I mean, it kind of had that same energy to it, without the sort of the over-the-top humour. And I just found myself, like, what can I say? Having fun. And I think a lot of that is down to the fact that they knew what they were making here. It doesn't take itself too seriously. In fact, it's very obvious at times, even with the dialogue, which I'm going to touch on next, that there's just no real attempt there to flesh or give any of these characters any depth. It's a very straightforward story, but it's how the world is brought to life and how Paul Anderson sort of throws us into this world, and with that kind of awareness that I felt the film had of itself, you know, where it's not taking itself too seriously. I think a lot of that just played into the reasons in why I did enjoy it as much as I did, even though I will acknowledge, you know, this isn't a good film. But for me personally, I think this is going to be, or it is, a guilty pleasure. It's a guilty pleasure for me. So yeah, let's get the negatives out the way with you. Yeah, you know, the writing, as you would come to expect in a Paul W.S. Anderson movie, is diabolical. It's shit. It's weak. There's no weight to it. It's not natural. It's not authentic. It's not organic. It's, you know, exposition heavy. But it's so exposition heavy, it's like, it's almost as if they know exactly what it is they're doing with this writing, and they're not attempting for it to be anything other than to explain to us, you know, the viewer, what is happening. And it does in many ways treats us, the viewer, as being brainless, you could say, that we're unable to work it out ourselves. And there are moments when it comes to the dialogue and the way in which the dialogue is delivered in certain moments that just made me cringe. Like, my eyes just rolled to the back of my head, and I'm like, oh my god. But I was still entertained. I was still having fun. I can't help it. I'm sorry. It's just one of those experiences that I'm going to hold my hand up. That, yes, you know, there's a lot of issues with the film, and the writing is one of those. And like I said, there's no weight there within the writing. And so as a result, we got these characters that we don't really care about. The only person that adds any weight into this movie is Dave Bautista. His presence. I mean, he is trying his best with the material that he's got. And I'm a big fan of Dave Bautista as an actor. But that's where that's where it ends, really, in terms of the weight and depth when it comes to these characters. Because it's just not there in the writing. But it's like so to the point. Like, it just felt so intentional, which is what kind of fed into me sort of feeling like, you know, they didn't want this film to be anything other than this kind of very low budget, sort of trashy B-movie, sort of fantasy adventure film, and just, you know, for us to have just a bit of fun, perhaps. You know, for example, I feel like if I'd watched this film as a 10-year-old, I would have lapped it up. I would have fucking loved this film. As a 10-year-old, I would have thought it was one of the best films I've seen. You know, and then as I grew older, it would have been one of those movies that, yes, I would come to sort of acknowledge that it's not a great film, but I would have some sort of nostalgic attachment to it. That's what this film is to me. And when it comes to the special effects, there's a lot of CGI, there's a hell of a lot of green screen, and like I said earlier on in the review, the green screen in a lot of moments really just doesn't work. But it kind of then plays into that kind of grungy, low-budget vibe that I'm getting from a visual perspective, from the overall aesthetic. And so that's another reason then why it kind of somewhat works for me. Even though, like, the green screen in times is like, oh, you know, that's bad. But at the same time, it just kind of works with what it is that I felt like they were just attempting to bring to life here. And, you know, among all of the CGI, and sort of the green screen, I just found myself appreciating when they did actually use practical effects, whether it be the sets and the detail within certain sets, as well as certain creatures. Like, I'd say 99% of the creatures in this film are CGI, but there is a moment where it's actually a guy in a suit. It's very brief, but I just found myself appreciating that. And yeah, there's a lot of detail within this movie, within the frame, that if you really kind of just sort of really look at it from a visual perspective, and, you know, you will find a lot to appreciate, I feel. Yeah, there's no weight, there's no depth, you know, there's nothing to really get you emotionally wrapped up into this story, and it is going to be very forgettable for a lot of people. But I just found it very fascinating from a visual perspective. Some people will be the opposite to me, you know, you're going to find it dull and drab, but for me, I kind of liked it. Yes, the movie at times is sloppy when telling its story with how the narrative flows. You know, we've got characters that we just don't care about because we don't really get to fully understand them or know them. Like, we get the kind of the basic idea, and that is, you know, very evident with the very, you know, heavy exposition-filled dialogue, but we never really truly get to sort of know them or understand them, but the essence is somewhat there. Like the Queen, for example. I felt like the Queen needed to play a bigger part. I felt like her character is very integral to the story, and we kind of get enough. At the same time, I also needed more. And so, yeah, you know, there's a multitude of problems here with the movie. There's a multitude of issues. But it didn't take away from my overall enjoyment. And I just liked how the overall story played out. I think it was 1 hour and 40 minutes. And, you know, it had that kind of... The narrative plays out just like a fable. You know, this is like a dark fairy tale fantasy. And it's kind of brought to life through the way in which the narrative flows as well. And I just found myself appreciating that aspect. You know, this is one of those movies that, you know, and you'll have a movie that comes along like this, and, you know, and everyone's going to kind of feel differently about it. It's a bad movie, but I just couldn't help but have fun and be entertained. It does take me back to being a kid again, watching those kind of sort of the old 80s, 90s B-movie fantasy films. And it doesn't have that kind of Hollywood sheen as well. It feels like a low-budget, straight-to-video movie, and so one of those ones that I would secretly like, you know, I'd have a guilty pleasure for, that there would be something about it, whether it be from a visual perspective to the soundtrack, that I would just find myself getting swallowed up within the world. And it's one of those movies for me. It's not a great movie, it's not a good movie, and it's very much a Paul W.S. Anderson movie. But for me personally, I haven't enjoyed a Paul W.S. Anderson movie like I did with In the Lost Lands since Event Horizon. Though, keep in mind, I haven't seen every Paul Anderson movie. So, do I recommend this film? Do you like films like Van Helsing? You know, are there times where you just want to turn your brain off for, 90 minutes or 2 hours and just have some mindless fun? It's entertaining, you can get... you can just enjoy a movie experience for what it is. And I think, I'll always go back to Van Helsing, because for me, Van Helsing is one of my biggest guilty pleasures. And if you like movies like that, then yes, I recommend it. There might be something in here for you. I just couldn't help but enjoy it. And I was shocked. I mean, I came out to the movie and I just was like, oh, I cannot believe that I just enjoyed that as much as I did. Yes, it's not a good film, and it's got a lot of issues about it, but it did, like I said, and I'm repeating myself now, but it just really did take me back to a certain era, or a certain time in my life, where I would sort of watch these certain type of movies and just enjoy it for what it was. Yes, the writing is terrible, like it lacks any weight and depth, but from an aesthetic or visual perspective, I just found myself captivated by what was being brought to life, even though I couldn't give a shit about, sort of these characters and their journey. I appreciated what they were attempting to do with this kind of, melding of a fairy tale and western and near future, sort of apocalyptic hellscape and all of that. I just, yeah. And, you got these mythical creatures thrown into the mix, where you got this werewolf and, yeah, I mean... It is what it is, and for me it wasn't unwatchable. Like, this is a film, I'm going to be honest here, I probably end up getting it on 4K. It's going to be one of those kind of rainy day, sort of, where you just want to turn your brain off for 90 minutes and just have a bit of cheesy, corny, mindless fun. So yeah, look, that's enough rambling from me. They are my thoughts of In the Lost Lands, and I will be giving In the Lost Lands a... They are my thoughts on In the Lost Lands. I never thought I'd find myself giving as much praise to a Paul W.S. Anderson movie as I did with his review. Not since Event Horizon anyway, which is a movie that I really like. And I don't feel like he's really made a movie since then like that. Though I think somewhat this kind of comes a little bit close, but there's still quite a big gap in terms of standards between those two movies, for me anyway, personally. But yeah, they are my thoughts. But what do you guys think? Have you seen it yet? Do you agree or disagree with anything I've said? Then please let me know in the comments below, and let's get a discussion going. And if you've made it this far into the review, perhaps you didn't, as soon as you found out that I actually liked something about this movie, then maybe you just left, and then if that's the case, you wouldn't be listening to me right here, right now. But if you did make it this far into the review, then thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. And if you want to watch future movie reviews from just some random Welsh geek rambling on, then please hit the subscribe button. It will mean an awful lot to me. My next review, now there's a load of movies coming out over the previous weekend and the weekend coming up, and so I'm hoping to catch Last Breath tomorrow, so I'll get a review up for for you for that, probably midweek. And then you've also got Snow White and the Alto Nights, which is releasing next weekend. Now, I know which one I want to make priority, and that's the Alto Nights. So we got a lot of reviews planned, a lot of reviews coming from me. So yeah, thank you guys for connecting to the channel, whatever it be, liking, commenting, subscribing. It means an awful lot, and it will always, to this day, overwhelm me that so many of you do want to follow just some random Welsh geek ramble on about film. But I absolutely love doing this. I am sort of slowly creeping towards the 500 milestone, and I just want to say a massive thank you to all of those that have subscribed recently. It means the world to me, and I'm looking forward to growing the channel. So yeah, enough rambling. Thank you all for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I'll be catching you guys soon.